Hey, fellow deep divers. Ready to unlock a topic that's really a must-know for anyone aiming for those top government exams,
Yeah.
like RBI, SEBI,
Yeah.
NABARD, even UPSC.
Mhm.
And hey, even if you know those exams aren't your thing,
Huh.
this is relevant to anyone who cares about creating a more inclusive India.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the Sugamya Abhiyan,
Yeah.
aka the Accessible India Campaign, which just marked its 9th anniversary.
9 years.
Before we jump in,
Yeah.
don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and
Yes.
smash that bell icon so you never miss a deep dive.
Gotta do it.
Okay, now, back to our topic.
Mm.
We've got a lot of ground to cover, from understanding its goals and achievements to really unpacking what this campaign tells us about India's commitment to inclusivity.
It's a big one.
It is.
What's fascinating about this campaign is that it really challenges our preconceived notions of what accessibility means.
Mm.
You might automatically think of wheelchair ramps, which are important, of course.
Yeah.
But this initiative goes way beyond that. We're talking transportation, digital access, even pilgrimage sites.
Right. It's about creating a society where everyone, regardless of their abilities, can fully participate.
Exactly.
So to really get this,
Yeah.
we need to go back to December 3rd, 2015.
Okay.
Imagine the Prime Minister launching the Sugamya Abhiyan with a clear mission to make India more inclusive for persons with disabilities.
That's right.
And this wasn't just a feel-good statement. There's a strategic plan in place with 3 main targets:
Okay.
built environment, transportation, and information and communication technology, or ICT.
And it's crucial to understand that this wasn't just some sudden idea.
Okay.
India had already signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities back in 2007.
Okay.
So the Sugamya Abhiyan was a concrete step towards putting those commitments into action.
I see.
Think of it like India taking the foundational principles of the 1995 Disabilities Act and saying, okay, now we're going to build on this and take it to the next level.
Okay, so we've talked intentions.
Yes.
But what about results? This campaign is all about turning ideas into tangible changes.
Right.
So let's dive into some concrete achievements.
Absolutely. And there are some pretty impressive numbers here.
Okay.
For example, over 1,700 government buildings have been retrofitted with accessibility features.
Wow.
Things like ramps, accessible toilets, lifts with braille, all those essential elements.
That's incredible. So it's not just about making grand statements. It's about making real changes on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's not just limited to buildings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, airports, railway stations, even BUSs are becoming more accessible.
You're absolutely right.
Wow.
They've been implementing ramps at airports, making sure railway stations have accessible toilets and lifts with braille, and even equipping buses with accessibility features. It's about creating a seamless and inclusive travel experience.
And that's so important because if you can't get around easily, you're essentially excluded from so much.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting because they haven't just focused on the physical environment.
Okay.
They've also been tackling digital accessibility.
Wow.
Over 95 central government websites and 676 state government websites have now been made accessible. And they've gone a step further by setting accessibility standards for TV viewing, specifically for people with hearing impairments.
Now, that's what really struck me as impressive, the fact that the Sugamya Abhiyan goes beyond just physical changes.
Yeah.
It's about making education and media accessible as well. It's a much broader vision of inclusion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
For instance, they established the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center,
Okay.
and over 1,000 people have already been trained in Indian Sign Language.
Wow.
This is a significant leap forward in terms of inclusive communication.
It's about recognizing that language comes in different forms, and everyone deserves to be able to communicate effectively.
Yes.
And I also read about how they're working on making TV content more accessible. We're talking news channels and entertainment channels, broadcasting accessible programs and movies.
Right.
This goes beyond just infrastructure. It's about shifting mindsets and ensuring that information is genuinely accessible to everyone.
That's a key point.
It is.
It's not just about ticking boxes, it's about creating a cultural shift where accessibility is ingrained in everything we do.
This is some seriously impressive stuff. But before we get too carried away celebrating achievements,
Yeah.
I'm curious about what happens next.
Okay.
The campaign's initial time frame might have passed. But does that mean the work stops?
Not at all. What's fascinating is that the momentum hasn't stopped.
Okay.
They're actually pushing forward, focusing on developing accessibility standards for even more sectors,
Okay.
including tourism and financial services.
All right, hold on. Tourism and financial services. Tell me more about that. This is getting really interesting.
Well, imagine a world where tourist destinations are designed with accessibility in mind from the get-go. We're talking accessible transportation, accommodation, information signage.
Yeah.
The whole experience being inclusive.
Okay.
And then think about financial services.
Mm-hmm.
How empowering would it be for people with disabilities to have full and equal access to banking, insurance, all those essential financial tools?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Each sector has its own unique considerations when it comes to accessibility.
Right.
So having those tailored guidelines could be a game changer.
Exactly. And this isn't just pie-in-the-sky thinking.
Yeah.
They're actually making concrete moves.
Okay.
They're training more access auditors, developing a web accessibility training program.
Wow.
And get this, they're working with IIT Kharagpur to introduce accessibility courses into their curriculum.
Wow. Integrating accessibility into the education system, that's thinking long term.
It is. It's about ensuring that future generations of architects, engineers, and designers have accessibility embedded in their approach from the very beginning.
This is really exciting stuff. We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. And we'll delve deeper into those future challenges and opportunities in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we left off talking about how the Sugamya Abhiyan is looking ahead,
Right.
tackling new sectors like tourism and financial services.
Yes.
But before we get into that,
Okay.
I think it's important to understand the nuts and bolts of this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for those listeners who are really serious about those government exams,
Yeah.
let's get a little more technical.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to talk about ramps and accessible websites,
Right.
but it's another to understand the legislation, the guidelines,
Yeah.
the specific standards that make all of this possible.
Right, exactly. So let's break it down. What are the legal frameworks and guidelines that underpin the Sugamya Abhiyan?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the foundation lies in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities,
Right.
or the UN CRPD, which India ratified back in 2007.
Wow.
This convention is like a global blueprint for promoting and protecting the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities.
I see.
It covers a wide range of issues, from accessibility to education, employment, and healthcare.
Okay, so India signed on to this global commitment.
Yes.
But how does that translate into concrete action on the ground?
That's where the Sugamya Abhiyan comes in.
Okay.
It takes the broad principles of the UN CRPD and turns them into specific, actionable goals and strategies for India.
Okay.
And within the campaign itself,
Yeah.
they've developed detailed accessibility guidelines for different sectors.
So tell me more about these sector-specific guidelines.
Okay.
What makes them so important?
Think of it like each sector has its own unique set of challenges and opportunities when it comes to accessibility. For example, making a historical monument accessible is going to require different considerations than designing an accessible bus, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So these guidelines provide a sort of tailored roadmap for each sector.
Exactly. They set out specific standards and requirements that need to be met to ensure accessibility.
Right.
And they cover everything from physical infrastructure to digital platforms and even communication practices.
So in a way, these guidelines are like the building blocks of the Sugamya Abhiyan. They provide the detailed framework for how to achieve accessibility in practice.
Precisely. And they're not just static documents either. They're constantly being reviewed and updated as new technologies emerge and as our understanding of accessibility evolves.
That's great to hear, because the world of technology especially is constantly changing.
Yes.
And speaking of technology, we touched upon this earlier, but I think it's worth delving deeper into the whole issue of digital accessibility.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Digital accessibility is a critical aspect of the Sugamya Abhiyan.
Okay.
And it's an area where India has made significant strides, but also faces ongoing challenges.
So let's talk about the wins first.
Okay.
What are some of the key achievements in terms of digital accessibility?
Well, one of the most notable accomplishments has been making government websites accessible.
Oh.
Remember those numbers we mentioned earlier? Over 95 central government websites and 676 state government websites have been made accessible.
Wow.
That's a huge step forward in ensuring that everyone can access government information and services online.
And it's not just about having websites in name only, right?
Right?
These websites need to be actually usable for people with diverse disabilities.
Exactly. And that's where things get a bit more complex because achieving true digital accessibility involves a lot more than just slapping on a few accessibility features. It requires a fundamental shift in how websites are designed and developed.
So what are some of the challenges in this area? Because I imagine there are quite a few technical hurdles to overcome.
There are indeed. One of the biggest challenges is ensuring that websites comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG.
Okay, WCAG. Yeah. That's something our exam prepping listeners should definitely make note of.
Definitely.
So tell me more about these guidelines.
Okay.
What do they actually cover?
Well, they address a wide range of accessibility issues, from making sure text is readable and images have alternative text descriptions, to ensuring that websites can be navigated using a keyboard or screen reader.
So it's about taking into account the needs of people with various types of disabilities, not just visual impairments.
Absolutely. We need to think about people with auditory impairments, cognitive disabilities, motor impairments, the whole spectrum of human diversity.
Right, because digital accessibility is really about inclusivity.
Yes.
About making sure everyone can participate fully in the digital world.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process. As technology evolves, so too must our understanding of accessibility and how to implement it.
Now, with all these complexities, I'm curious about how the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan is actually working to address these challenges.
Okay.
What are some of the concrete steps they're taking?
Well, one of the key strategies has been to invest in training and capacity building.
Okay.
They've developed web accessibility training programs specifically for government departments and agencies.
So it's equipping the people who actually build and maintain these websites.
Yes.
With the knowledge and skills they need to make them accessible.
Exactly. And it's not just about technical skills either. It's also about raising awareness and fostering a culture of accessibility within government organizations. Because ultimately, digital accessibility is everyone's responsibility.
Right. It has to be embedded in the organizational culture.
Yes.
Not just seen as an add-on or afterthought.
Precisely. And they're also working to address the lack of trained professionals in the field of digital accessibility.
Okay.
Remember those access auditors we talked about earlier?
Yes.
Well, they're expanding the access auditor program to include digital accessibility expertise.
So having more qualified professionals who can assess and advise on digital accessibility is crucial.
It is. Because let's be honest, digital accessibility can get pretty technical.
Yeah.
Having those experts who can guide organizations through the process is essential. And it's not just about compliance.
Right.
It's about creating websites that are truly user-friendly and inclusive for everyone.
This is also fascinating. We're really starting to see the depth and complexity of this campaign.
Yes.
It's not just about making a few superficial changes.
Right.
It's about addressing accessibility at a systemic level. But hold on, I'm wondering about something. We've been focusing a lot on government initiatives.
Right.
But what about the private sector?
Yeah.
Don't they have a role to play in all of this?
That's a great question, and it's one that the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan is increasingly grappling with. Because ultimately, creating a truly inclusive society requires the participation of both the public and private sectors.
Right. It can't just be a government-led effort.
Exactly. And that's why they've started to engage more actively with the private sector, encouraging businesses to adopt accessibility standards and practices. They're conducting workshops and awareness campaigns, providing resources and guidance, and even offering incentives for businesses that prioritize accessibility.
So it's about creating a win-win situation where businesses recognize the value of accessibility.
Yes.
Both from an ethical and a business standpoint.
Precisely. Because let's face it, accessible businesses are good for everyone.
Yeah.
They attract a wider customer base, enhance their brand reputation, and contribute to a more inclusive and equitable society.
It just makes good sense all around. And it speaks to the broader vision of the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan to create a cultural shift where accessibility becomes the norm, not the exception.
That's exactly right. It's about moving beyond simply complying with regulations and embracing accessibility as a core value that benefits everyone.
This is seriously inspiring stuff. But I'm realizing that we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yes.
There's so much more to uncover and explore.
You're absolutely right. And we'll dive even deeper into those fascinating aspects in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, we've talked about the goals, the guidelines, the challenges, but now I want to hear about the real-world impact of the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan.
Yeah, that's what truly matters, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about how this campaign is changing lives.
Exactly. So let's talk about some concrete examples of how this campaign is making a difference for people with disabilities in India.
Well, one of the most visible impacts has been the physical transformation of public spaces.
Right. Those 1,700 government buildings that have been retrofitted, that's got to have a huge impact on people's daily lives.
Absolutely. Imagine being able to enter a government building without having to worry about whether there's a ramp or an accessible toilet.
It's about dignity and independence, isn't it?
It is. It's about being able to access essential services and participate in civic life without facing unnecessary barriers.
And it's not just government buildings, right? We talked about transportation hubs like airports and railway stations becoming more accessible.
Yeah, think about the difference it makes for someone who uses a wheelchair to be able to navigate an airport smoothly without having to rely on assistance every step of the way.
It's about empowering people to travel independently and experience the world on their own terms.
Exactly. And these changes aren't just happening in big cities either.
That's important to point out. Accessibility shouldn't be limited to certain areas.
You're absolutely right. The Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan aims to make accessibility a reality across the country,
Wow.
even in rural areas and smaller towns.
And that's a huge undertaking considering the vastness and diversity of India.
It is, but it's a testament to the commitment to inclusivity that's driving this campaign.
And let's not forget about the impact on the digital world.
Yeah, the increasing accessibility of government websites is opening up a whole new realm of possibilities for people with disabilities.
Imagine being able to access government services, information, and even job opportunities online
Yeah.
from the comfort of your own home.
It's about bridging the digital divide and ensuring that everyone can benefit from the opportunities offered by the internet.
And it's not just about practical matters either.
No, the focus on making media and entertainment accessible is so important.
Being able to enjoy a movie or a TV show with captions or audio descriptions, that's about inclusion in the cultural sphere.
It is. It's about being able to share in the joys of entertainment and stay connected with the world around us.
And what about the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center? That's got to be having a real impact on the deaf community.
It is. By training more people in Indian Sign Language, they're breaking down communication barriers and creating a more inclusive society.
It's about recognizing sign language as a legitimate and valuable form of communication.
Yeah, and it's about empowering deaf individuals to participate fully in all aspects of life.
I'm also thinking about the work being done to make pilgrimage sites more accessible.
That's a beautiful example of how the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan goes beyond just practical considerations and addresses the spiritual and cultural needs of people with disabilities.
Imagine being able to visit a sacred site and experience it fully, regardless of your physical abilities.
It's about creating a sense of belonging and allowing everyone to connect with their faith and heritage.
These are just a few examples of the real-world impact of the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan.
Yeah, it's a story that's still being written, but the progress so far has been remarkable.
And it's a reminder that creating an inclusive society is an ongoing journey.
It requires constant effort, innovation, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
But the rewards are immeasurable.
Yeah, when we create a society that's accessible to everyone, we all benefit.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan, let's take a moment to appreciate the incredible work that's being done.
And let's all commit to doing our part to make India a truly inclusive nation.
A nation where everyone can thrive and reach their full potential.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.